Paula Kerger is the president of PBS. We've been talking about possible cuts to PBS. Ms. Kerger, thanks for bearing with us. Exactly how much funding is at risk for PBS, and where would those cuts be felt the most?
Funding that is part of this rescission bill represents the government contributions to public broadcasting for the next 2 years. It's a little more than 500 million, excuse me. Most of that goes to the 330 stations across this country. And for some of our stations, it represents about 10 to 15% of their funding. But for a significant number of stations, particularly those serving rural communities, it represents as much as half of their funding. And so this is why we are so focused on trying to make the case that if these cuts go through, it's about eliminating the possibility of funding and sustainability, frankly, for many of our stations.
And Ms. Kerger, I know you've heard the arguments that are out there when it comes to these local stations. People say, what maybe now with neighborhoods connected by online blogs, social media, maybe these local stations aren't so important anymore.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back on the history of PBS, we were created to address market failure. It was recognized that commercial media would be, significant, that would be able to deliver a lot of services. And it's ironic that even in what feels like a time of abundance, that many communities are not well served by broadband. A lot of people do not have access. Much of the content that we produce is quite different than what commercial organizations do. If you look, for example, just at our kids programming. Our kids programming is designed for young children, particularly the 50% of kids in this country that do not attend formal pre-K. And those programs are not just safe and fun for children to watch. They have educational curriculum embedded in them with the idea that children that watch our programming will pick up the basic skills that they need to be successful the first time they enter school and put them on a path for success in life. So when I look at these small stations in particular, and I have traveled, I've been in this job for a while, I've traveled all over the country, I've been to almost every single station, and I'm proud of our stations in large markets, but I'm very proud of the stations that are in small communities where in many communities they are the only media organization, and certainly the only local media organization, and the only ones that are focused on their communities and ensuring that people have all the resources that they need.
And given how important those local stations are in those communities, is there not a way, do you think, for, let's say, a philanthropist to help fund these stations, or some other form of donations or advertising to keep these local stations going to where you wouldn't even have to ask for federal funding?
It's a good question, and look, over the years, we've worked very hard in what we see as what has been a tremendously successful public-private partnership. We look to match the money that the federal government contributes, actually by 7 to 1, and in communities where there are more resources, those stations are more aggressive and successful in the way that they've been able to raise money. But in small communities, the resources just don't exist. The other thing that people don't always understand about PBS is not only are we not a network, every station is individual, they make their own decisions of what they broadcast, they create their own content, but we also we are part of the infrastructure for the emergency alert system in this country. Public safety is a big piece of the work that we do. And if you have been in an emergency, you know that that cellular service often fails because of it being overloaded. Broadcast is one to many. And so there are the alerts that people see that they can watch on their stations, that they get through their phones. Many of that is fed by us, as well as the emergency alerts that we feed using our broadcast technology directly to emergency responders. And so, we take seriously our role as a public service organization. All of that is at risk. If stations start to go off the air, that means that parts of the country will not have access to that kind of over-the-air coverage that in moments of great stress are really profoundly important.
A lot of this, Ms. Kerger, as you know, seems to be about opposing the actual content on PBS. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican of Georgia, she says she supports cutting funds, pointing to programming that features transgender people. Take a listen to one of the accusations from the hearing here on the Hill in March.
PBS News is not just left-leaning. but it is actively uses taxpayer funds to push some of the most radical left positions, like featuring a drag queen on the show Let's Learn, a show targeted toward young children ages 3 to 8 years old. I can tell you right now, Ms. Krueger, specifically, as a mother, if I had walked in my living room or one of my children's bedrooms and seen this child predator and this monster targeting my children, I would become unglued. And that is how most parents feel all over this country.
That was Congresswoman Green talking to you, Ms. Krueger, also citing a 2015 documentary called Growing Up Trans about transgender children. My question is, in hindsight, was airing programming like this a mistake? And is PBS less likely to broadcast something like that going forward, given the backlash?
So first of all, the program that she referenced, Let's Learn, was not a PBS show. It was created by our local public television station, and it was not distributed by PBS. So it's incorrect to label that as something that is part of PBS Kids. Growing Up Trans was a documentary that was done more than 10 years ago by Frontline, and it looked at it was designed for adults, and it was designed to help people understand the debate over transgender issues. And so, and that I think is very much in line with the kind of work that we should be doing.
Would you air that again if Frontline came to you and said, we've got this program, or does this now give you pause? I'm trying to basically get at what are the effects of Congress going after your funding?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's important to distinguish programming that is designed for an adult audience. Frontline airs at 10 o'clock at night. And we are very committed to making sure that of all the important issues of the day, to create programs that help people, sort of better understand the complexities. And so we can't shy away from doing our job. That is what we were created to do. And so I think that as we continue to look forward, we have, so much extraordinary programming coming up, including a mammoth series from Ken Burns that will premiere in the fall on the American Revolution. I've been very excited about this program because as we as a country look at where we are heading and try to understand our path forward, I think it's important for us to reflect on where we came from and what was envisioned when this democracy was created. This is the kind of work that we do. This and, a full range of programming, news and cultural programming and history and science and natural history. This is what we have on our air each and every night. And for children, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we are very focused on making sure that children enter school the first time really prepared and excited to learn. That was what was envisioned when Sesame Street came on the air, when Fred Rogers began his great work. And, this year I'm getting tons of graduation cards from young people who are saying, thank you for helping to raise us. It is profoundly moving to hear and to read stories from young people who credit us for being part of their success. These are the kind of cards that you would send to family members or to friends, maybe a favorite teacher. And it's humbling to think about the impact that we have. And so this debate is so profoundly important because we want to make sure that we have the ability to continue to do that moving forward, and especially want to make sure that stations in small communities have the opportunity to be of service as they have been for decades.
And what is the plan, Ms. Krueger, if these cuts go through? Will PBS sue to try to stop them?
Well, if these cuts go through, obviously, there's the budget process later on in the year, and we'll next focus on that. And we will be forced to make some very difficult decisions about what programs we can continue to make. Obviously, we'll work closely with our stations to try to see whatever support we can provide them. Again, remember, we're not a network. Our stations are all independent. They're supported by their communities. And our job is to support their work and to give them the resources that they want from us. And so we'll be working closely to see what we can do. But I really worry very deeply that If these cuts go through, this isn't like a newspaper that goes away and then another newspaper could come back and start up again. These are television broadcast licenses, and once they're gone, they're gone. They will never be back in these communities again. So the stakes here are really high.
All right, Paula Kerger is the CEO of PBS. Ms. Kerger, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Patrick. It was a pleasure being with you.